They say the Dragon King never kneels. But Kira watched him crumble slowly, bone by bone, while his own blood circled like sharks around a throne with no prince to claim it. Her name was Kira Baptiste, and she became the most dangerous woman in Seoul the day she agreed to carry a dying emperor's legacy. Ryu Junhyun was dying, and everyone in the Korean underworld knew it. The leader of the Crimson Syndicate, the Dragon King himself, had built an empire on fear and iron will. For 3 decades, his name alone made warlords kneel and enemies vanish. He controlled half of Seoul's shadow economy, owned legitimate corporations worth trillions of won, and commanded a network of soldiers who would die at his word. But none of that mattered now. Cancer was devouring him from the inside. 3 months, the specialist said. Maybe less. His hands shook when he tried to sign documents. His legs barely supported him from his bedroom to the study. The man who once crushed rebellions with a phone call now needed assistance to stand from his chair. And he had no son. 3 children. Ryu Minesio, 29.
Ryu Taechin.
Ryu Hana, 22. Sharp, educated, ambitious. But in the Crimson Syndicate, in the blood-soaked world of Korean organized crime, only a male heir could inherit the empire. It was tradition. It was doctrine. It was survival. Without a son, the syndicate would shatter. Rival families would carve up his territory like vultures on a carcass. Everything he'd built over 30 brutal years would dissolve into memory and myth. His wife, Kim Ji-hye, watched him deteriorate with the cool precision of a surgeon evaluating a terminal patient. Their marriage had been strategic from the beginning. Her family, the powerful Kim faction, had needed the syndicate's muscle and reach. Ryu Junhyun had needed their political connections and respectable veneer. 27 years of sharing a bed, performing affection for the cameras. Now she was protecting her own future. When Ryu Junhyun became too weak to manage without constant care, Kim Ji-hye made a decision. She needed someone to watch him, feed him, clean up after him while he slowly faded. Someone to witness the mighty Dragon King reduced to trembling hands and labored breathing. But she was calculating. Dangerously calculating. She didn't hire a professional nurse. The compound sat behind 12-foot walls in Gangnam, where old money pretended not to know what blood paid for the marble and gold. Kira's taxi stopped at the outer gate, where 2 men in black suits appeared before the driver could even shift into park. They searched her single battered suitcase with gloved hands, checked her passport twice, and made her wait in the guardhouse while they verified her paperwork. 20 minutes. She counted every one. When they finally opened the main gate, Kira saw what empire actually looked like. The driveway curved through manicured gardens where every tree looked older than she was. The main house sprawled across the property like a sleeping beast, all dark wood and tinted glass. Traditional Korean architecture twisted into something modern and cold. Security cameras tracked her from every angle. More men in suits lingered near doorways, hands folded, faces blank. The front doors opened before she could knock. Kim Ji-hye stood in the entrance hall, 48 years old and carved from ice. She wore a cream-colored hanbok that probably cost more than Kira's entire life. Her hair pulled back so severely it looked painful. She didn't offer her hand, didn't smile, just studied Kira with the clinical interest of someone examining produce at the market. You're late. The traffic. I don't care about traffic. Kim Ji-hye's English was perfect, accent barely there. You'll address me as ma'am. You'll speak only when spoken to. You'll stay in the West Wing and never enter the family areas without permission. You're here to perform a function, nothing more. Do you understand? Kira's mouth went dry. Yes, ma'am. My husband is dying. You will keep him comfortable, keep him clean, keep him quiet. You will not discuss his condition with anyone. You will not discuss this family with anyone. You will not exist beyond these walls. Kim Ji-hye stepped closer, and Kira caught the scent of expensive perfume mixed with something sharper. If you cause problems, you'll disappear. Seoul is very good at making people disappear. Am I clear? Yes, ma'am. Good. Kim Ji-hai turned, heels clicking on marble. Han Dae-young will show you to your quarters. The man materialized from a side corridor, like a shadow gaining substance. Han Dae-young stood at least 6'3", built like violence wrapped in an expensive suit. His face looked like it had stopped several fists in its time, a thin scar running from his left eyebrow to his cheek. He didn't introduce himself, didn't acknowledge Kira beyond a slight nod toward the hallway. She followed, her footsteps too loud in the silence. He moved like a predator, all controlled power and awareness. At a door in the West Wing, he finally stopped and spoke, his voice gravel and smoke. You don't leave this wing without escort. You don't ask questions. You don't make friends. His eyes fixed on hers, dark and utterly empty. You're alive because Madam Kim allows it. Remember that. Then he opened the door and waited for her to enter her cage. They brought her to him the next morning. Han Dae-young led her through corridors lined with artwork that probably belonged in museums, past rooms she wasn't allowed to look into until they reached a set of double doors at the end of the East Wing. He knocked once, waited, then pushed them open. The Dragon King sat in a leather chair by the window, wrapped in a silk robe that hung off his shoulders like a child wearing his father's clothes. Kira had expected a monster. She found a ghost instead. Ryu Junhyun had been a large man once. You could see it in the bones of his frame, the width of his shoulders. But the cancer had eaten away everything soft, leaving him skeletal and gray. His hands rested on the chair's arms, fingers too thin, veins standing out like rivers on a map. When he turned to look at her, his eyes still held something sharp. "Ah," he said in Korean, then switched to rough English. "The assassin arrives."
Kira froze.
Han Dae-young's hand moved fractionally toward his jacket. Ryu Junhyun laughed, a dry wheeze that turned into coughing. "Relax. If my wife wanted me dead, she'd have done it herself. Cheaper that way." He waved a skeletal hand. "Come closer, girl. Let me see who's been hired to watch me rot." She moved forward, uncertain. Up close, she could see the yellow tinge in his eyes, the way his breathing took effort. "What's your name?" "Kira, sir."
Kira.
He tasted the word. "You're terrified. Good. Means you're not stupid." He gestured weakly toward a tray of medication on the side table. "Let's see what you can do. Time for the poison." Her hands shook as she sorted through the pill bottles, trying to match them to the chart the previous nurse had left. She dropped one. It bounced across the hardwood floor, and she scrambled after it, cheeks burning. "Wrong dosage," Ryu Junhyun said mildly when she brought the water glass. She checked again. He was right. She'd misread the label. "Sorry, Try again." It took her 3 attempts to get it right. He waited patiently each time, occasionally offering dry commentary. When she finally held out the correct pills, his hand trembled so badly that half of them scattered. "Well," he said, staring at the pills on his lap. "We're quite the pair, aren't we? You can't read labels, I can't hold water. My enemies would weep with joy to see this." Kira knelt to collect the pills, fighting the urge to cry from pure frustration. "Leave them," he said. "We'll try again in an hour. By then, maybe you'll have figured out which bottle says pain medication and which says makes you hallucinate that you're being eaten by cats." Despite everything, despite the terror and the strangeness and the weight of Kim Ji-hai's threats, Kira felt her mouth twitch. "There," Ryu Junhyun said, satisfied. "She's human after all."
Good.
Corpses make terrible company, and I'll be one soon enough. 3 weeks passed before Kira stopped flinching every time Ryu Junhyun coughed blood into a towel. She learned to read his pain in the tightness around his eyes, to know when he needed the morphine before he asked. She learned that he preferred his tea scalding hot, that he couldn't sleep lying down anymore, that some days the cancer ate his appetite, and other days it was simply the knowledge of dying that made him push food away. They talked, at first in fragments, then in longer stretches that surprised them both. "You want to know how it starts?" he asked one gray afternoon, staring out at the rain. "An empire like mine? It starts with a dead man and a debt. I was 19. My father owed money to the wrong people. They came to collect." His fingers traced the arm of his chair. "I killed 3 of them with a tire iron. The syndicate boss heard about it. Said I had potential." He smiled without humor. "Potential. That's what they call it when you're willing to break bones for money." Kira said nothing, just adjusted his blanket. 30 years, he continued. 30 years of blood. I built this empire on corpses and fear. Made men kneel. Made families disappear. He looked at her then, eyes hollowed by more than cancer. "And now I'm the one disappearing." Later, after his medication, he asked about her. Kira hesitated, then found herself talking about her mother's illness, about the medical bills that swallowed everything, about the interest rates that turned hundreds into thousands. She didn't mention where she was from, kept it vague, but the desperation translated across any language. "Loan sharks," Ryu Junhyun said quietly. "I used to employ men like that." He studied her face. "You have iron in you, girl. More than my own children. They've spent their whole lives fat on my money, and they'll fracture the moment I'm gone." The words hung between them like prophecy. That night, Kira was returning from the kitchen with his evening tea when she heard voices in the sitting room. She recognized Ryu Minesio's sharp tone immediately, and a man's voice she didn't know. 3 weeks, maybe a month, Minesio was saying. The doctors aren't optimistic. And the will? The man, presumably Gong Jinho, her fiancé, hasn't been changed. Everything's split among us. Once he's gone, we move fast. Consolidate power before the other families can react. Minesio's heels clicked on marble. My brother's useless, and Hannah's too young. I'll need you to handle the lieutenants. Some of them still have this ridiculous loyalty to father. They'll fall in line once we control the money. They always do. Kira's hands tightened on the tea tray. She backed away slowly, careful to avoid the creaking floorboard near the hallway junction. When she brought Ryu Junhyun his tea, her hand shook for reasons that had nothing to do with incompetence. "What is it?" he asked, reading her too easily now. Kira set down the tray and met his eyes. "Your daughter," she said quietly. "I think you should know what she's planning." "What do you think happens next? Will Ryu Junhyun protect Kira from his own family, or is she digging her own grave? Drop your predictions in the comments below. The doctors came 3 days later. Kira waited outside while they examined him, listening to the murmur of medical Korean she couldn't understand. When they left, their faces told her everything she needed to know. Ryu Junhyun didn't call for her until evening. She found him at his desk, staring at papers he wasn't really reading. The sunset bled through the windows, painting everything the color of old blood. "The cancer's in my liver now," he said without preamble. "Spreading faster than they predicted. 3 months if I'm lucky." He set down the papers with hands that shook more than usual. "I'm out of time, and I need something from you that no amount of money should be able to buy." Kira's throat tightened. Something in his voice made her want to run. "I need a son." The words landed like a physical blow. For a moment, Kira couldn't breathe, couldn't think, could only stare at this dying man who'd just asked the impossible. "The Crimson Syndicate's charter is absolute," he continued, his voice raw. "Only a male bloodline heir can inherit. Without one, everything I've built collapses. My family tears itself apart. My enemies claim the spoils." He looked at her with something close to desperation. "You're young, healthy, and you're not part of this world. You won't use a child as a weapon. You have a wife who hasn't touched me in 15 years and made it clear she's finished bearing children."
His jaw tightened.
"I'm asking you, because I have no other choice, and because I know you're desperate enough to consider it. Kira's mind raced. This was insane. This was 60 million won. The number stopped her thoughts cold. I need it in writing, she heard herself say. A legal contract. Protection guarantees. Everything documented and witnessed. Ryu Junhyun pulled a folder from his desk drawer as if he'd been waiting for this. Already prepared. 3 payments. 20 million when you agree, 20 when pregnancy is confirmed, 20 when the child is born. Legal protection for my family, financial security, and a trust established in the child's name that no one can touch. He slid the papers across the desk. You'll have lawyers review it. Independent ones, not mine. I want you to understand exactly what you're agreeing to. Kira stared at the contract, her hands trembling. Inside those pages was her mother's life, her freedom, her escape from drowning. But the price. I know what I'm asking, Ryu Junhyun said quietly. I know it's unforgivable, but I'm a dying man trying to save everything I've built, and you're a woman trying to save everyone you love. He met her eyes. Sometimes survival demands we become something we never imagined we could be. Kira's fingers touched the contract's edge. How long do I have to decide? Until morning. After that, I won't have the strength to ask again. She signed the contract at dawn with 2 lawyers present, neither of whom worked for the syndicate. The pen felt heavy in her hand, each stroke of her name feeling like a door closing behind her. Ryu Junhyun's signature came after hers, shaky but legible. 20 million won transferred to an account in her name before the lawyers left the room. The first time happened 3 nights later. Clinical. Necessary. They didn't speak about it beforehand, and after. Kira returned to her room and stood in the shower until the water ran cold. Ryu Junhyun had been gentle in the way of someone performing an unpleasant duty with as much dignity as possible. There was no romance, no pretense. Just 2 desperate people doing what survival demanded. It happened twice more over the following weeks, timed with calculated precision. Then they waited. 3 months felt like 3 years. Kira continued her duties, watching Ryu Junhyun deteriorate further. His skin turned gray-yellow. He slept more than he was awake. Some days he couldn't leave his bed. But his eyes followed her whenever she entered the room, burning with the desperate hope of a dying man who'd bet everything on one last gamble. When her period was 2 weeks late, Kira bought a test from a pharmacy during a supervised trip for his medications. She took it in her bathroom at 4 in the morning, hands shaking so badly she could barely hold it steady. 2 lines. She stared at them until they blurred, until the reality of what those lines meant crashed over her in waves. There was a child growing inside her. Ryu Junhyun's child. An heir to an empire built on blood. She told him at sunrise. He was awake already, too weak to do anything but sit propped against pillows. When she showed him the test, something broke in his face. Not tears. The Dragon King had no tears left, but something close to them. A son, he said, his voice barely a whisper. I know it. I can feel it. His skeletal hand reached for hers, gripped it with surprising strength. A son to carry my name, to give meaning to all of this. He looked at her with something that might have been gratitude or guilt or both. You've given me what 30 years of marriage couldn't. Hope. Kira said nothing. She couldn't, because while he saw hope, she saw the target she'd just painted on her own back. Every member of his family would now see her as the threat that destroyed their inheritance. Every enemy of the syndicate would see her as leverage. The second payment arrived in her account that afternoon. 40 million won total now. Enough to save her mother 10 times over. And enough, perhaps, to buy her own coffin. Ryu Junhyun called the family meeting for Sunday evening, when everyone would be present for their ritual dinner. Kira watched from the kitchen doorway as they arrived. Ryu Minasio with Gong Jinho, both dressed like they were attending a funeral they'd been looking forward to. Ryu Taejin, looking pale and uncomfortable. Ryu Hannah, the youngest daughter, scrolling through her phone with studied indifference. Kim Ji-hye entered last, her face an ice sculpture of controlled contempt. Han Dae-young positioned himself near Kira, his presence both protection and warning. She could feel her heart hammering against her ribs. Ryu Junhyun sat at the head of the table in a wheelchair now, too weak to walk even with assistance. But when he spoke, his voice carried the weight of 30 years of absolute command. I've called you here to announce that the Crimson Syndicate has an heir. The silence lasted exactly 3 seconds. What? Minasio's voice cut like glass. I'm going to be a father. The child will be a son. My bloodline will continue. He gestured toward the doorway. The mother is Kira Baptiste. Some of you know her as the Maid. The explosion was immediate. Minacio surged to her feet, face twisted with fury. You can't be serious. That foreigner? That nobody. She's carrying a bastard.
Gongjinos nard.
This is insane. The clan will never. Father, please, Taejin tried, voice shaking. Think about what you're. Kim Ji-hye's laughter cut through the chaos, cold and sharp as winter. So, this is your solution? Impregnating the help? How perfectly desperate. She's nothing. Minacio screamed. She's disposable trash you brought into empty bedpans, and now you're giving our inheritance to her bastard? Ryu Junhyun's fist hit the table with enough force to rattle the dishes. The sound cracked through the room like a gunshot. Everyone froze. Enough. The word came from somewhere deep in his failing chest, a roar from the Dragon King one final time. His eyes blazed with the fury that had built an empire. That child is my legitimate heir. The contracts are signed. The lawyers have been paid. Every document is in order. He swept his gaze across his family, and Kira saw them all flinch. And hear this clearly. If anything happens to Kira Baptiste or my unborn son, every single one of you will be disinherited. Completely. You'll get nothing. Not one. Not one property. Not one soldier. You can't, Minacio started. I can. His voice cracked, but the fury held. I built this empire. I decide who inherits it. Cross me on this, harm her in any way, and I'll burn it all down before I die. I'll leave everything to charity. I'll give it to my enemies. I'll destroy what took me 30 years to build rather than let you vultures pick it apart. He was shaking now, the effort of his rage consuming what little strength he had left. But no one moved. No one spoke. She is under my protection. Touch her, and you're dead to me. The note appeared under Kira's door 3 days later. No envelope, just folded paper with 5 words in careful English. Accidents happen to pregnant women. She brought it to Ryu Junhyun with shaking hands. He studied it with eyes that had seen every kind of threat imaginable, then burned it in his ashtray without a word. But she noticed Han Dae-young appeared outside her door that night and never left. The bodyguard became her shadow. He was there when she woke, when she moved through the compound, when she returned to her room. He didn't speak unless necessary, but his presence was a wall between her and the hatred that radiated from every corner of the house. She felt it in how the other staff looked away when she passed, in the way conversations died when she entered a room. Her toothbrush went missing. She found it 2 days later in the garbage, the bristles cut to jagged points. She bought a new one and kept it locked in her room. The tea came on a Tuesday afternoon, delivered by a staff member Kira had never seen before. Earl Grey, prepared exactly how she liked it. She was raising the cup to her lips when Han Dae-young's hand shot out and stopped her. He took the cup, sniffed it, then walked to the window and poured it onto a potted plant. They watched together as the leaves began to curl and blacken within minutes.
Rat poison.
Kira's hands wouldn't stop shaking. Han Dae-young made a single phone call, and within the hour, 3 staff members were escorted from the compound. But they both knew it didn't matter. The hatred ran too deep, and there were too many ways to kill someone in a house this large. Ryu Junhyun increased security. More cameras. More guards. He moved Kira to a room next to his own, with Han Dae-young stationed directly outside. But even he knew it wasn't enough. The rival families know about the heir, he told her one night, his voice hollowed by exhaustion and morphine. Word travels in our world. They see what my family sees, a pregnant woman with no protection once I'm gone. An heir who's vulnerable. What does that mean? Kira asked, though she already knew. It means they're planning. The Choi Syndicate, the Zhang family, the independents who've wanted my territory for years. He looked at her with something like regret. They won't wait for me to die. They'll strike while they can still prevent the succession. His skeletal hand found hers. They'll come for you, Kira. And when they do, all my threats and contracts won't matter. Dead women don't inherit fortunes. Dead children don't claim empires. Outside her window, Seoul glittered in the darkness. Somewhere in that sprawling city, people were sharpening knives with her name on them. Han Dae-young checked the locks one more time, his face grim. Neither of them slept that night. Kira heard them in the study at 2 a.m. She'd gotten up for water, moving quietly through the darkened halls, when Minasio's voice stopped her cold. Tomorrow night. The doctor I hired will say it's a routine check, but the injection will trigger contractions. Natural miscarriage. No one can prove anything. And if she survives? Gong Jin-ho asked. She won't be pregnant anymore. That's all that matters. Once the heir's gone, father's threats mean nothing. We move forward with the succession as planned. Kira backed away, her heart hammering so hard she thought they'd hear it. She ran to Ryu Junhyun's room, burst through the door without knocking. He was awake, as always now, sitting in the chair by the window. She told him everything in a breathless rush. His face went gray, then hard as stone. Han Dae-young, he said into the phone, voice sharp despite his weakness. Get her out.
Now.
London. The jet's fueled and ready.
A pause.
I don't care about the hour. If she's here at sunrise, she's dead. 30 minutes. That's all the time Kira had to grab essentials, while Han Dae-young coordinated with the pilots. Ryu Junhyun pressed an envelope into her hands. Documents, account numbers, contacts in London.
Go, he said.
Save my son. That's all that matters now. She wanted to say something, anything, but Han Dae-young was already pulling her toward the garage. They took the armored sedan, Han Dae-young behind the wheel, another guard in the passenger seat. The private airstrip was 40 minutes away. They made it 20 before the first vehicle rammed them from behind. 2 black SUVs coming from nowhere, boxing them in on the highway. Han Dae-young cursed in Korean and floored the accelerator. The sedan surged forward, but more vehicles appeared, 4 now. 5, coordinating their attack with professional precision. Hold on, Han Dae-young growled. He yanked the wheel hard, sending them off-road through a construction site. The sedan's reinforced frames smashed through barriers, bounced over debris. Behind them, 3 vehicles followed. Gunfire shattered the rear window. The guard in the passenger seat returned fire, leaning out the window. Han Dae-young drove like a man possessed, cutting through narrow alleys, across vacant lots, anywhere the bigger vehicles couldn't follow easily. Kira crouched low, hands wrapped around her stomach, praying to gods she wasn't sure she believed in. They burst onto the airstrip access road. The jet sat 200 yards away, engines already running, stairs deployed. 2 SUVs blocked their path. Han Dae-young didn't slow down. He aimed straight for the gap between vehicles, clipped one hard enough to spin it sideways, and rocketed through. The sedan skidded to a stop at the jet stairs. "Gio!" he shouted. Kira stumbled out. Gunfire erupted behind her. She saw Gong Jin-ho emerge from one of the SUVs, weapon raised. Han Dae-young stepped between them, returning fire with calculated precision. Men fell. More appeared. Get on the plane. Kira ran up the stairs. At the top, she turned back. Han Dae-young was still firing, still holding the line, his body a wall between her and death. Their eyes met for one brief second. Then he went down, 3 bullets finding their mark. The jet door slammed shut. The engines roared. And as they lifted into the night sky, Kira watched Han Dae-young's body grow smaller until Seoul swallowed it completely. A doctor waited on the plane, a woman with kind eyes who spoke in soothing English while checking Kira's vitals. Blood pressure elevated but stable. Heartbeat strong. The baby unharmed despite the violence and terror. Kira lay back in the leather seat, wrapped in a blanket, and felt the adrenaline slowly drain from her body, leaving only exhaustion and grief. Han Dae-young was dead. He died so she could live, so this child could live. She hadn't even known his first name until tonight. The flight attendant brought her a tablet an hour into the flight. A message came through before takeoff. It's marked urgent. Akira's hands shook as she opened the video file. Ryu Junhyun's face filled the screen, recorded sometime in the past few days. He looked worse than she'd ever seen him, barely able to hold himself upright in his chair. Kira, he began, his voice a whisper. If you're watching this, you're safe. You're away from Seoul, away from my family, away from the violence. He paused, gathering strength.
I'm dying.
By the time you land, I'll likely be gone. The cancer has spread to my brain. The doctors say hours, maybe a day. He looked directly into the camera, and his eyes held something she'd never seen before. Peace. I spent 30 years building an empire on blood and fear. I made men kneel. I destroyed families. I became a monster, because that's what survival demanded. His hand trembled as he wiped his face. But you gave me something I never thought I'd have.
Hope.
The knowledge that my bloodline continues, that something good might come from all this darkness. A tear tracked down his gaunt cheek. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I want you to know that these last months, watching you care for me, seeing you grow with my child, it's the closest I've come to peace in 30 years. The video cut to black, then resumed. He held up papers. Everything is arranged. A trust worth 800 million won, managed by lawyers in London who answer only to you. Properties. Investments. All legally protected, beyond the reach of my family or my enemies. His eyes grew fierce. But more importantly, I've left instructions. My son is not to inherit the syndicate. He is not to be raised in that world. I've destroyed too many lives to let mine destroy his. He leaned closer to the camera. Raise him free, Kira. Let him be something I never could be, a good man. That's my final wish. That's the only legacy I want. The video ended. Kira landed in London at dawn to news that Ryu Junhyun had died peacefully in his sleep 3 hours earlier. The lawyers met her at a private terminal with documents, keys, and the final envelope he'd left. Inside was a handwritten letter, shaky but legible, repeating his wishes for their son's freedom and thanking her for giving him hope in his final days. The third and final payment, 20 million won, appeared in her account that afternoon. 6 months later, in a private London hospital, Kira gave birth to a healthy boy with his father's sharp eyes and strong lungs. She named him Junhyun Baptiste, carrying the Dragon King's name, but not his darkness. As she held her son for the first time, watching him sleep peacefully in her arms, Kira thought of Han Dae-young's sacrifice, of Ryu Junhyun's final tears, of the violence and terror that had brought this child into existence. And she made a promise. This boy would never know that world. He would be free. The Dragon King's final wish would be kept. Did Kira truly escape the Syndicate's reach? Or will the past come hunting for the Dragon King's heir? Subscribe now to be notified when new stories drop. Don't miss what happens next.